Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today we're talking with a returning guest, Larry Kotlikoff. Hey, Larry, how's it going?
Very good. Nice to be with you again, Kirk.
Good. Well, I wanted to bring you back on because, a lot's changed since last time you came on, and the world's changed quite a bit with inflation and basically global prices and anything related to inflation. Let's just to say that.
Right.
But I wanted just for the listeners who didn't hear your prior interview, which I thought was great. Tell people a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I'm an economics professor at Boston University. I've been there a long time, since 1984, and also have a software company that has financial planning software. So I'm head of that, and then I work on all kinds of different issues in economics, not just personal finance, but macroeconomics, banking, forecasting. The new paper out called "The Future of Global Economic Power" that just came out, just posted yesterday at kotlikoff.net. That's my academic website, and then I'm working on things like carbon taxation, and inequality and fiscal progressivity and the marriage tax and work disincentives. So today I'm actually talking to you from Switzerland, where I'm working with some co-authors on the brain drain, developing a large scale simulation model, computer model, to figure out what the brain drain is costing developing countries, and countries like Russia that are experiencing major exodus because of the way their governments are being run.
Interesting. So I'm just out of curiosity, the brain drain are you trying to study how to stop it, or because I'm pretty sure I have an answer for how Russia can stop the brain drain.
Yeah, they can drain one brain, get rid of that guy. Well, it's not so much how to stop it as to just understand its potential implications for, if you have most of the skilled Russians, for example, leaving Russia to different parts of the world, what is that going to mean to the Russian economy now and through time? And it's going to obviously not just with fewer skilled people, the premium for skilled people is going to go up, but the unskilled people are going to be experiencing a decline in their wages because they don't have as many skilled people to work with. So there are these kind of reverberation issues, repercussion issues, and then how much inequality is being generated, let's say in a country like Russia, because of this, but then how much loss of GDP, how much inequality is there across countries? If you look at economics, for example, I've been doing work with Russian economists, going to Moscow for 2 weeks a year for the last 7 years. So I'm pretty familiar with Russian economists, and I also know Russian economists who left Russia years ago and are now in the top universities in the US. There's no, maybe with one exception or a couple exceptions, there's no Russian economist left in Russia who's as good as the people that are the Russian economists who emigrated to Harvard, and they're now at Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Yale, these top universities. So that's like a complete brain drain of top Russian economists, and that's a big cost, I think, to their economy over time, to their society. So that's just an example that I know personally. But if you look at other fields, computer science, any of the STEM, mathematics, any of the STEM fields, engineering, I'm sure it's all the same story. Now that can be reversed, but they have to, give people incentives to come back, and they're not going in that direction.
No, I would say you're correct. They're not going in that direction, unless they're trying to conscript their entire economics department. I think,
Yeah,
going in the wrong direction. But no, I think it's an interesting concept you're talking about with brain drain, because, I would think, the U.S. there's a ton of opportunity, as much as I think we're maybe in many ways not going in the right direction. I think it may be still a better direction than most of the world. But isn't it just with some of these countries, there is tremendous opportunity. In other countries, there isn't. So isn't that kind of a natural progression of countries and how they manage themselves from a leadership perspective? And then obviously, if there's more opportunity, they stay, and if there's less opportunity, they leave. I mean, isn't that
Yeah.
kind of like free
So
markets?
Yeah, so the beginning is like building a mathematical model of multiple regions, people with different skills, production with capital and labor of different types. And then you think about why would people leave from here to there? And then ultimately you can try and bring in some of these issues into the model. First of all, you try and put it together with data, try and figure out what it's telling you quantitatively about how many Russians are going to leave and how that impacts those different factors. But then these other things like, autocracy and the inability to move ahead. If you are, let's say, talented, maybe you're born to unskilled labor workers, but you have the ability to be skilled, whether you get that training. So that can all be folded into the model over time. But to begin with, we don't necessarily have this kind of a large scale model of this huge issue that's in the world. So that's what economists I think are good for. They can actually get some insight. Everything in the end is pretty stylized, pretty abstract, compared to all the details of the real world. But it's like a first order handle on what's going on that helps you think about. For example, think about this paper I just posted on iCotlicop.net, The Future of Global Economic Power. It shows that China at the end of the century is most likely going to have an economy that's 2.5 times the US GDP. India and China together will have about 40% of world output. The US and Europe, if you go back 20 years, they had about half of world output. The US had, 20-25% of world output by itself. And then, Europe and then Japan, the kind of developed world. But China is rapidly overtaking us. Their economy is larger than ours by some measures already, whereas it was, less than half of ours 20 years ago. So project that forward, you take into account all the demographics. The demographic changes are just unbelievable. The growth of world population is going to be about 2.5 Chinas between now and the end of the century. The US is going to add to our population the amount of Filipinos, or about 120 million Filipinos. The UN projects our population is going to go from about 340 to 440, 460 over the next 80 years or so. If you look at Africa, they're going to add an extra 1.5 Chinas to the population. They're just going to explode. The Middle East is going to explode in population. Europe is going to decline in population. Russia, China's population is going to drop by 400 million people. That's the amount of our population in 2100. So these changes are phenomenal. Interacting with productivity per worker changes, they have these implications. So this is the first large-scale study of that. It was just posted yesterday on my website.
Well, I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes for people who are interested. To me, that's fascinating because I look at we do a lot of kind of research from a macroeconomic standpoint, and even though I majored in economics, I don't put myself with the title economist because I think it's a different kind of profession. But I think it's really important because you're looking at global scale changes like China. If you look for the past 20 years and you just say, well, the next 20 years are going to be the same, you're probably going to be wrong. But a lot of people do that, right? They have recency bias and they look at things and say, oh, well, China's just going to be fine. Well, no, they're not. Just like Japan is not going to take over the world if you were 1990, even though everyone thought so at the time. There are many reasons why they obviously declined a little bit. So, there's.
I was going to say that, just interject to say that if you look at the top forecasters on Wall Street of do they actually even know the demographic projections, the demographic realities? They're kind of set in stone because we have so many young Africans, for example, that even though their fertility rate is projected to come down, there's so many that are going to be coming into the birthing years that they're going to produce an enormous number of people. So Nigeria is going to end up with a bigger population than the US at the end of the century, for example. So if you don't know these facts, you can't even begin to talk about the future. And I think if we did a survey of the top economists, the chief economists of Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan, they may not know any of this stuff, but they might, I don't know. But it's important.
So I want to get to inflation in a minute, but outside of inflation, what would you say some of the biggest economics surprises that people should be aware of globally?
Well, I think, we had this big shock with COVID and with the Ukraine, Putin's war, and with China turning on and off its production and supply chain problems. But so, for example, the price of gas went up to, like, for premium gas, went up to, I think, $6 a gallon. My car happens to take premium gas. I was shocked. Now it's around $3.40. The last time I filled up. That shows you the resiliency of the world supply system, that when prices go up, supply comes on board. So we have far less, supply from Russia, at least directly to the West, but we have other, the US is producing much more oil and gas, and some of it's being liquefied, sent to Europe. Other parts of there's other suppliers to Europe. The fact that Germany and Western Europe in general went from 45% dependence on Russian energy to something like 7.5% dependence from all its energy sources over the course of the year is just testimony to the ability of the capitalist system to respond. So I think this connects back to inflation. The price of oil today per barrel is no higher than it was back in February when Putin invaded. The price of wheat is no higher than it was back in February when he invaded. It went way up and then it's come down. And so that's good news for whether or not this inflation is going to be a long-term thing. But prices did go up. We have been running like a 10%, 9% inflation. And now maybe getting into our psyches, the 35 million businesses that are setting prices, they might say, well, I've got to raise prices every year by 9% now because we're in a different regime. And I've got to raise my workers' wages commensurately. And now we've got an economy that's running, wages and prices are rising like that, but we have a lot of people on fixed income who aren't keeping up. We have a lot of people, and we have a tax system that's taxing nominal asset income. So our tax system is not indexed fully for inflation. Social Security benefits are subject to federal income taxation. There's two thresholds beyond which first a half and then 85% of your benefits are part of your taxable income, and therefore they're taxed. So the thresholds are fixed. And as your income goes up because of Social Security COLAs and just income rate increases in asset income because you're being compensated for inflation in the bond market and other factors, well, gee, now you're paying more taxes on phantom income because it's not real income that's going up. It's just your income's going up because of inflation, but you have to pay taxes on it. So we need to be fixing the tax system. In other words, what my view is that we shouldn't kill the economy to kill inflation. We should reform the economy, reform our institutions to live with inflation, because I think inflation is basically a temporary phenomenon. But we also have to get our fiscal house in order, because fundamentally, Kirk, our country's long-term broke big time, because we have all these off-the-book liabilities, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, paying the defense budget, and we've got an aging population, and we're about 8% of GDP short to pay our projected bills as projected by the CBO through time. 8% of GDP is like, adding another 1.5 payroll taxes. So imagine, Kirk, I come to you, I'm the president, I say, we're broke long-term. We don't want to cut back any spending. We don't want to print money to pay for our bills, which we have been doing. And because that's going to contribute to inflation. So we want to just raise taxes. It's going to have to be 8% of GDP. The 12.4% FICA tax that you are paying, your employer is sending in a check on your behalf, but it's coming out of your pocket. Well, that's going to have to now go up to 30%. Sorry, Kirk. Can you imagine what would happen? And if it doesn't go up by 30% today, it's going to have to go up by a bigger number in 10 years, maybe 32%, 33%. So the longer we wait to adjust our fiscal policy, the more us older people get off the hook by being able to spend more, consume, and then drop dead. And the younger people, the millennials, the baby, the Z, all
Gen
the
Z.
different Gen Zs, all those folks are going to be facing, as it is, astronomical fiscal burdens, but they're going to go up. So we have to have leadership on both sides that say we have to do long-term fiscal accounting, which is called generational accounting, that I helped develop going back even 20 years ago. We've never done any of it.
But what's the appetite for that? I mean, let's be frank. I mean, all these are good ideas, but you have to have people implement them, right? I mean, you could say, hey, during boom times we should have a surplus, and during bad times, we can run a deficit. But no one's ever going to do that. They're just going to run a deficit, and then during boom times they're just going to spend it. So, I mean, there's the number side, and then there's a practicality of it. And I think, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, because I think that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where the politicians kind of hit the bridge embankment.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have this guy, remember this, I don't know if you remember, you're too young to remember this guy, was a Speaker of the House, Rostenkowski. He ended up going to jail for, I think, stealing money from mail or something, I forget, or stamps. He was like stealing stamps. Anyway,
Reputable guy.
Speaker of the House of Representatives. He put together this proposal. Let's have all the elderly contribute somewhat to a fund, which we're going to use to help them pay for their nursing home. We're going to have basically nursing home insurance organized by the federal government, but everybody has to contribute. So he thinks this is great. He goes to Chicago, where he's from, to give some speech. Literally, they organized, the elderly people, ARP, whatever, they organized a demonstration. They blocked his car, and these people in walkers and canes started banging on his car with their canes. And he barely, he was almost physically hurt, assaulted. So yeah, we have, people think everything's for free, right, and that we can cut taxes to zero and that our kids will be just fine. I think we have to have politicians to stand up and say, it's either you or your kids or your grandkids. Take a look at them, take a look at their faces, and decide, do you want to shove more into your mouth, or do you want to leave something for them? And if you give them that very strong, clear message, it's not that there's a trade-off, that this is a zero-sum game, and we have to address it, or our country's going down the tubes. We're heading the way of Venezuela, Zimbabwe.
Well, I can definitely agree with that, and maybe we have to get the baby boomers out of our political seats. There's too many 80-year-olds in there that should have retired many years ago, that are very selfishly focused on their generation. So, but I do want to touch on inflation, because I think a lot of what you're saying is interesting, but I think the challenge is during times like this where you have high inflation, you can't start cranking up the gears and just saying, all right, on top of everything else, we're going to raise taxes. On top of everything else, we're going to add this, we're going to add that. I mean, people are getting squeezed now, and this hasn't even started, in my opinion, but I know I want to get your opinion on it. So I think the question is like, how do you implement something when we're going into, high inflationary or tougher times?
Well,
And
so I'm not into raising like the tax rates based on our existing tax system. There's a book on my website. It's called You're Hired. It's a platform it's basically a platform that I put out when I ran as a writing candidate for president in 2016. I was a registered writing candidate, so I decided that it was important for an economist to specify what we think we should do in order to fix so many different things in the country, including the fiscal system. So what I would do is, I would scrap the income tax. I would make the payroll tax progressive. I would scrap the corporate income tax. I would have a value-added tax, a retail sales tax, 2 consumption taxes, and a progressive, highly progressive personal consumption tax, so that the rich, who are now the super rich, there are three, I think there's something like 3,000 billionaires in our country. These people basically pay no taxes, and they do it very completely legally. If I'm a billionaire, all I do is I borrow money to spend on my consumption, and I just accumulate my debt. But my stocks and other assets, I just let them appreciate. The losers, the ones that lose value, I can sell and reshuffle my money, rebalance. But mostly I let stuff appreciate. And then when I die, I give these appreciated assets to my kids with what's called a step up in basis. The kids don't have to pay any of the capital. There's no capital gains tax that comes due. And so basically throughout this entire time, I'm paying no taxes of any kind because even my labor income, I call asset income. I don't take a salary, so I don't even have to pay payroll taxes. So we have a capacity to generate more revenue more efficiently. Right now, the way our tax system and benefit system is structured, you won't believe this, but there's another paper on the website under articles, kotlikov.net. It's called Marginal Taxation of Americans. And it shows that if you look at the extra taxes that we pay for earning an extra $1,000, you make that calculation, including all the different fiscal programs, and taking into account the fact that you have to pay more taxes if you earn more money, not just now, but in the future, but also you lose benefits. You might lose your Medicaid, you might lose your food stamps, your Obamacare subsidies. You get these benefits clawed back, not just now, but in the future, because the extra $1,000, you might save some of it. That might affect how much of the stuff you get. Okay, so you put all that together, you find that among the poor, people at the bottom 20%, a quarter of them are facing marginal taxes above 70%. So if we want to ask, why do we have endemic poverty in this country? Our fiscal system is locking people into poverty. If you're facing a 70% or higher marginal tax on earning more money, are you going to earn more money? No. At some point, you're locked out. You're just saying it doesn't make, I can go and be a criminal and make more money, or be an underground economy, but it doesn't make sense for me to actually take a job that pays 50% more, and because I'll end up essentially with nothing more. I'll just be working for the government. This is the kind of thing we need to fix. In addition to trying to get more revenue, we need to fix these incentives to work that are terrible. So there's a proposal for how to do that. That's very simple. And I'm getting to the age where I can actually win the presidency if I run.
Yeah, I think you're qualified now.
I was 2 years before.
We've all stretched the boundaries of what that looks like recently. But so I wanted to kind of dip into two things. So first is inflation, and the second is, as interest rates obviously climb, we have a huge amount of debt, which I know you've talked about in the past, and the interest on that debt is going to increase substantially, which is not going to make our economic situation any better. So I wanted to touch on that first, because I know you've touched on the amount of debt we have as a country, as well as, there's the declared debt, and then there's the off-balance sheet debt. So I don't know if you want to touch on that quickly.
Well, let me just say one thing, that the inflation is actually fiscally good, in the sense that the government is paying back its debt in watered down dollars. So we have about $22 trillion in official debt outstanding. And let's say we ran an inflation last year about 10%. It's a little bit higher than we did. But so now that's nominal repayment, just dollars you have to repay. But if inflation's if the price level is 10% higher, then you're paying back in effect in fewer hot dogs. So the government made in effect $2.2 trillion just by running a 10% inflation, because imagine the inflation to see this clearly. Imagine all prices and wages went up by 1,000% and the government debt was still, what it was. Then it would be peanuts for people to be paying back the debt, because it wouldn't, in terms of hot dogs, it wouldn't be at all meaningful. People would be getting, so inflation making money makes money for the government. And that's the good news. The bad news is that when you print money, to not have to raise, instead of raising taxes, you print money to pay your bills. And we've been doing lots and lots of that for a long time now. Then you generate inflation, and then you hurt. The government is helped, but then people are hurt. And people are hurt because their checking account loses real value. This inflation was a surprise to most people. So they didn't, weren't able to invest a year ago at rates that incorporated a 10% inflation, 9%. If you're on a fixed pension, like a Detroit policeman, you're going to have been nailed. You've lost 10% of your purchasing power for the rest of your days. So inflation is a good thing for the government. It's a bad thing for the public, and we cannot really, through time, rely on printing money. Our bills are so, it's 2.2 trillion sounds like a lot of money the government made, and that needs to be set aside or set against the deficit, the official deficit that we ran, because the real deficit was smaller than the nominal deficit. That's another way of saying it. But the size of the debt is so big, and the size of the off the books liabilities are so big, and those are all pretty much indexed to inflation, that we can't print our way out of this problem, of our fiscal problem. Now, the other thing people need to think about with inflation is, how to protect yourself. And right now, the real returns to investing in let's say treasury bills is still negative. So one thing you could do, very simple thing, is just buy next year's toilet paper today, or next year's paper towels, any of the things, because you'll get a zero real return on those in quote investments, but the real return on treasuries is essentially zero or is negative, and it could be a bigger negative if inflation takes off, continues high. So there's that. There's buying I bonds. There's buying inflation indexed treasury bonds, which are called TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. Real estate, even though it seems like it's crazy, the mortgage rates are really high. Well, if you buy real estate, you've got something physical, and you sit in your home, and you've got the stream of physical services, just the services of that house, the sheltering services. That's a real, in effect, annuity. So that's something, or a car, so that's why these things that are physical have gone up in price, because people realize they're natural hedges against inflation. And then I think there's other things like, we're seeing, I think when you look at what happened to the British pound just the other day, so the Liz Truss, the new prime minister, announces some policy that a lot of people described as crazy because it's running a big deficit as a share of GDP. But when Biden announced his student loan forgiveness, it's pretty much the same size as a share of GDP. Nobody said this was fiscally irresponsible, crazy, and that the dollar should drop 20, 30%, but the pound dropped. So the point is that the British, I think the British are in much better fiscal shape than we are, because they have a healthcare system that's not running out of control in terms of its prices. Their pension system is, they are aging, but I just think if you look at their long-term finances, and I've done some of that work for the Treasury, for the UK government in the past, I've kept track on it. I would be buying British pounds, because I think there's just been an overreaction to something. The government does something, and then you have somebody like Larry Summers jump on the news and say this was the most irresponsible act of any developed country in the history of all time, or something outrageous like that, some hyperbole, and then the pound drops dramatically, I'd say that's a good time to buy the pound. If Larry Summers says X, I would think Y.
Well, so isn't, and this is one of the struggles I've had with economics is, there's a little bit too much shared thinking in the profession, where too many people have the same point of view, which, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I mean, that's one of the nice parts about being an economist is you only find out way later if you're right or wrong. You're only theorizing. But I think one of the challenges I've seen is that everyone kind of thinks the same way. And what I'm getting to is, if you think about inflation, right? You have the Federal Reserve claiming that it's not a problem, then it's transient. Now it's not transient, but it'll be okay. And I have a very strong opinion about inflation. I think that for many reasons, the market is not discounting what the real challenge is. So I like some of your suggestions about protecting yourself from inflation, but realistically, do you see inflation as transient, or do you see it as as a bigger problem, or how do you look at this from the bigger picture?
I guess my view is that a lot of the price increases were transient, like oil and energy and grain prices. So a lot of it was just kind of a temporary disruption. But then if we have these 35 million businesses who are setting the prices get into their head that we now have inflation, they're going to just keep it going. And then they could even decide that I need to, since I'm not going to be raising my prices every year, I'm going to leapfrog the process and take an even bigger price increase, because I don't want to upset my customers by annually raising my prices. I have this little software company. We thought about that very carefully when we raised our prices about a year ago, which we hadn't done for 5 years. We can't do this every day. We have loyal customers that are going to be upset with us. So now you have an overshooting potentially of inflation, and then you have an overreaction of the Fed potentially. So what we need to have is I don't know if you know this term, jawboning. This was something that John Kennedy, when he was elected president, the first week or so, maybe month, he got on the TV and started yelling at the steel company executives. I think he brought them all into a meeting in Washington, or into his office, and basically told them not to raise their steel prices because they wanted to increase them like 3%. They announced a steel price hike by a pretty small number in our current terms. But anyway, back then it was a big deal. And he basically jawboned them, embarrassed them to the point where they gave up on their price hikes. I think that's what we need today. I think we need to have President Biden and the Treasury Secretary Yellen and Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, in unison be talking to the public, to the business community, and saying, look, your job right now, your patriotic job, is not to be raising prices. It's to make sure you raise your wages so that your workers are kept even. But we need everybody to get on the same page of raising the prices by, of our inflation coming down. We can't do this on our own. We're not setting your prices. You have to come along and do it. And that's, if you explain this to them, that this is ultimately, if we do this together, this is going to be in everybody's interest. Maybe that can help and happen. Otherwise, things are kind of, there's nothing to say that the inflation can't be 20% next year versus 2% next year. I mean, yeah, if the chairman of the Fed lets interest rates go up to 20%, then that'll probably put the economy in a recession. We'll have super high mortgage rates. The construction industry will crash. We'll be in recession. The recession that Volcker produced by letting interest rates go up by 20% from one day to the next, or actually from 1 hour to the next, he announced he was changing policy. Basically, he wasn't going to keep interest rates low. And the market on its own, the Fed did nothing, jacked up interest rates that same hour, probably within the same minute, up to about 20% or so. And we never seen interest rates that high. Within a year or so, we had a great recession. The recession in 81, 82, in terms of unemployment, it was 10%. The Great Recession in 2008, 2009, the unemployment rate got up to 10%. So we really had a great recession back then. We don't need that. If I were in charge at those levels, I would be trying to talk turkey to the public about the economy, try and provide some education about the economy, the fact that we need to coordinate beliefs and actions on inflation, on hiring, on not firing people. You know, if I think there's going to be a recession, or if I think that you, Kirk, or think there's going to be a recession, I may fire my workers who are your customers because I think you're going to fire your workers who are my customers. It might be that I really don't think personally that there's going to be a recession, but I think that everybody else does because the press has been talking about it nonstop. And the so-called thought leaders have been telling us it's going to happen. So therefore, I defensively fire, you defensively fire, and the whole thing melts down. It's self-fulfilling prophecies.
But isn't I mean, I think I agree with a lot of your points, but I think you're in some ways oversimplifying this because the big question is what is causing the inflation? It's not business owners deciding they're just going to, screw their customers and charge more. It's because of supply-demand imbalance in many ways. So, if you don't have enough goods, and I mean, it started with COVID in many ways. I mean, you could argue that we should have had inflation like 20 years ago, but it didn't happen because you're outsourcing it to China. So, there's a lot of reasons for the inflation, and I guess I wonder if a lot of these paradigms have been shifting so that we're going to have higher inflation. So, I like the job owning as a tool because that's the Fed's best tool. And they never admit to it, but that's really their best tool is they talk up the direction they're going and they tell everybody this is where we're going and they direct traffic to that location. But with inflation, I guess I personally don't see how you get rid of this inflation by just job owning. I think it takes a lot more, in many ways, demand destruction.
No, I agree with, but if my product is your input, you're saying, look, if I have to pay more for steak that I'm selling in my restaurant, then okay, so then the guy who's marketing the beef, if they're all demanding a higher or setting a higher price, then your input prices are higher and you have no wherewithal except to try and cover your costs. And the other thing that's the interesting thing about what's going on here is on the supply side is we have a very low unemployment rate, kind of a post-war low almost. We have a very high employment to population ratio. That, in other words, the share of people in the economy that are working, that are employed, is very high. If you look at average hours worked, they're almost at a post-war high. So we think we have the sense that there's a labor shortage because, but it must be that what's going on is that certain sectors can't get workers because these workers have moved on into other sectors for a higher compensation. So if you look at the restaurant industry, they're short of workers, and that's why, partly why their prices at the restaurant are sky high. And we also lost 70,000 restaurants during COVID. But you still would think that if everything was kind of like the same as it was, we wouldn't have super high. You wouldn't have to pay $15 for a hamburger at a restaurant, but you do.
Well, I agree. I have to be, frank that the labor shortage is a bit of a puzzle. Nobody's been able to explain it very well as to why. I mean, everyone comes up with their reasons, but to me, none of them made 100% sense as to why there's a shortage. But I would imagine if you go out and you push us into recession, that's going to go away pretty quickly. There's going to be a job shortage at some point, and then it's going to go the other way.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the supply of labor has not gone down. If there's a shortage, it can't, if foreigners are buying up if there's a big demand for US goods, then, we might be selling output there, and then there's no workers to produce over here. So that sector feels like there's a shortage, but overall, there's no shortage in the sense that we're fully employed in this country. Hours, employment ratios, unemployment, all at post-war numbers that suggest that we've got as much labor supply being produced by this economy as there is. So overall, I don't know what a shortage means here, but I do think that there are sectors that are experiencing what they would call shortages, and others are experiencing a lot of demand, and people are moving over there. That must be. It's the only thing I can see here.
It's a hard puzzle. I'll agree. It's very challenging to disentangle a lot of what's happened in the last few years and try to make some sense of it. But
with airlines, for example, we had a lot of pilots who retired or went into other fields because they were in effect grounded because there's so little demand. And so it's going to take a while to restore all this. And then the other thing is, taking the Russian supply of energy in effect off the global market, taking Ukraine's supply of lots of things, including grain. This is a reduction in supply to the world, and we should be experiencing, like other regions, a decline in real incomes, and that's what's happening. And that's what we're seeing partly through inflation. Inflation is kind of the way in which we experience declines in our living standards to accommodate the fact that there is less global supply. That could change. Somebody could put a bullet in Putin's head, and Russia could come back online, Ukraine, and within a couple of years back to normal.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Well, as we, in the interest of time, we got to wrap it up. But Larry, tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're doing and where people can find more about you.
Okay, well, one cool place is to go to larrykotlikov.substack.com. So I have a newsletter that if you subscribe, you can subscribe for free or contribute to the cause here. But you'll get newsletters and also podcasts. I'm doing really interesting podcasts with people like Martin Wolf. He's the top columnist for economic correspondent for the Financial Times. Sebastian Mallaby, who's written a lot about the Ukraine for the Washington Post. He's a regular columnist. David K. Johnston, who has written several books on Trump. And, we're talking about, what kind of legal situation he's in with respect to, not turning over these documents, and all the folders that were marked top secret, where there's nothing inside of those folders. Who got those documents? Were they sold to somebody, for example? Anyway, it's an interesting, if you love Trump, if you hate Trump, David is a Pulitzer Prize journalist, and he has anyway, there's that. LarryKotlikov.substack.com. Kotlikov.net's my main website. I have 2 software programs through my company. One's called Maxify.com. It's a lifetime economics-based financial planning tool that any household can use. Any 10th grader could use and plan for their parents and plan for their college. It's good for every age. Maxify, Maxifi.com. And then there's one other thing, which is called MaximizeMySocialSecurity.com. That program, $40, you can get Social Security right. About 85% of Americans are taking Social Security far too early and leaving tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table by screwing up their collection decision on Social Security. Social Security has an enormous economic incentive to be patient and wait to get a higher number with respect to your retirement benefit. And this software tells you exactly how to go about, what to do. Very cheap. And what you don't want to do is ask Social Security what to do, because invariably they're going to give you the wrong answer, or an incorrect answer, or an incomplete answer. and you want to go in and tell them what to do, and the software is going to tell you what to tell them. So
Great.
that's my elevator pitch.
Awesome. Well, Larry, I really appreciate you coming on the show again and sharing your wisdom with us. Economic times are changing, and I always like to have different opinions on as how we should look at it. So thanks again for joining us, Larry.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room. All right. Well, that was a great interview with Larry. I really appreciate him coming on the show again. He's just all around great guy. I mean, if you think about people who are trying to make the country better, and at least economically, which is where his strong suit is, he's one of the few that's actually coming up with outside the box ideas. So really appreciate him coming on the show again to share his wisdom with us. So now we're in the panel portion of the show. This week we have our very own Megan Gorman. Hey, Megan.
Hey, Kirk, how you doing?
Doing great. And we also have our very own Barb Friedberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, Kirk. Hi, Megan. Happy to be here.
All right, well, let's just dive right in. Megan, what were some of your takeaways from the interview?
First of all, I think for anyone who's interested in the markets, Larry is a good person to follow in general. He is pretty active on Twitter. He writes for Forbes, and he is interviewed fairly frequently. And what I like about this interview and what I've read and what I've heard him say before in the past is he's very consistent voice. And I think that's really important when you are looking for commentary on the market. We live in a day and age where the news cycle, and in particular financial news, is structured to cause you to react, right? Cause you to want to do something. And I find that people like Larry are very measured, they're very even keel, and they have a practical and rational nature about the markets. And I say that because we're sitting here in the middle of October, and markets are down considerably for the year. There's this big debate, are we in a recession or not? And over the past few weeks, I've gone back and read a number of things, and Larry's pieces are some of the stuff I've been reading or interviews with him. And he's been fairly consistent, which is sometimes a recession is a psychological thing. Like we are willing it into being. And he's pointed out a lot of data points that has shown that perhaps we aren't in a recession, but that we will likely fulfill that because we are all psychologically getting there. So my first big takeaway from this interview is find commentators who are even keeled, who are rational, who look at data, whose objective is not to get you all frantic and crazy, but who really are focused on explaining the market, explaining the economy, and explaining what's happening and how, you should be viewing that data.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Megan. I think that's extremely important as well. Barb, what about you? What are some of your takeaways?
Larry reminded me of looking at history and looking at the past, having been through decades of market movements from 1998, when there was the Black Friday market crash, 2008, the recession, even the early 80s, he alluded to 82, 83, where we had a huge recession, interest rates. We had high inflation like now, but the difference was we also had interest rates that were really high. So inflation was in the double digits, but I could get a CD for 10%. So there's a diversion between today and the past. But the reminder is this is not permanent. You don't want to panic now. And I would like to discuss strategies on how to both psychologically handle these times, which are really upsetting. I mean, even people who have a lot of money don't like to see their portfolio lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in 6 months. And then also physical strategies that you should do. Should you change your investments? Shouldn't you change your investments? Kind of how to cope today. So those were some of the things that piqued my interest from Larry's interview.
So yeah, and that's great, and I appreciate that, Barb. I think one of the things I really liked about the interview was, I mean, we talked about brain drain, and you think about all these economic issues that really never come to light, but are enormous when it comes to global economics. You think about a whole country, their best and their brightest, they send them here to get educated, and then they stay because there's a lot of opportunity, and they don't go back. And you think about what that means for that country in the future. I mean, frankly, it's in part their problem because they're creating an environment where these people leave. But long term, it doesn't lead to growth in that country. And I think in that way, the U.S. has a huge advantage economically because we just pull the best and the brightest from the world. So I love that topic, and it's something that's really not discussed enough. I do want to talk about the fact that, we're in this economic situation we are now, and it's a global problem. It's not just the US. We feel like it's our problem because it affects us, but everyone around the world. I mean, I just saw a video on Twitter about these enormous gas lines in France and them actually turning people away because you had too much gas in your tank. You couldn't fill it. And just the craziness. I mean, we had that here in the 70s, and they're seeing it in other countries. So, Megan, just kind of from your perspective, I mean, people are freaking out right now. How should they be thinking about these markets?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because when there is so much news out there, you're motivated to act, right? And what I always remind clients is asset allocation isn't really for great markets, right? When the markets are booming and everybody's doing well, asset allocation is great, but asset allocation is really strategy in a down market. And this is a really hard down market because I think it's only the third time in history that both stocks and bonds are down as much, right? But the thing is, we've been here before numerous times, right? And part of this is it's important to ride it out. So I remind clients that they don't need to look at their accounts. Part of what they pay me to do is to monitor the accounts. Part of what my role is to keep them in the markets, to keep them focused. And at the same time, look for different pockets of opportunity that seem to be coming. So, for instance, we're doing things more along the lines of tax loss harvesting and doing it with our municipal bond manager, because as we tax loss harvest, we're able to pick up additional yields in the portfolios, which makes clients feel better. But in this type of marketplace, it's about being steady. It's about staying involved. And I think what is important after this marketplace is to have those Monday morning quarterbacking sessions. And I say this because I've done this with clients after the 08-09 crisis, after the 2020 crisis, and we'll do it after today, which is knowing what you know after we've gotten out of the volatile market, How do you wish you behaved? What do you wish you had done differently? What are you glad you did during that marketplace? And I know on the show, I consistently talk about an investment policy statement, an IPS. And an IPS can be anything. It could be a Word document that you just update on how you want to have the mandate for your portfolio. But this is where, post these volatile markets, you should be noting down the behaviors you want to exhibit in a volatile market.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, we all need to be better prepared for sure. Barb, what are some of your thoughts? I mean, I know you've got a lot of history as a portfolio manager, and you've probably seen this before, what we're going through, or at least some similarity of it. So how would you suggest people think about it?
Well, first of all, piggybacking on what Megan said, know how much risk you can tolerate. And everyone thought they could handle a lot before the recent market drop because markets were only going up. So, hey, I can be in 100% stocks, I'll be fine. Well, now that your stock market portfolio is down 20, 25%, are you fine? So, like Megan said, use this data now to design your portfolio for how it's going to work for you going forward. But I want to give a particular call out to people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, because those of us that are in that age range have a more difficult situation than those who are younger than 50. And that's because we have a limited amount of time to make our money back. And so losses are worse for us. If you're in retirement, losses are worse. But hold on, don't be scared, because there's a simple solution to that, which is you want to tilt your investments to a probably more conservative allocation going forward. Yeah, bonds have not done great, but that is a super rare occurrence. And I would say cash is okay, first of all. Now you can easily get 3-4% on your cash with, no risk of losing principal. It's not a lot, but it's a heck of a lot more than zero. So don't be afraid to have a cash allocation in your portfolio for your peace of mind. Fixed income is okay too. Yeah, your bond portfolio has gone down recently, but it will reverse, and you've got those steady income payments that you can use either to live on or to reinvest. So really do a sit down with yourself, with your financial planner, and evaluate, how am I going to set up my portfolio going forward? Couple other things. Don't be afraid to have a year or 2 years in cash. Look, if you don't have that now, work up towards it, particularly if you're in retirement, because the advantage of that is you will not be forced to sell your stock assets once they've dropped. So you can leave them to come back, which they will. And then my third point, and then I will shut up, is don't try to time the market. I know it is so tempting, and everyone on TV, last night we saw these spider ETFs saying, yeah, you can pick your sectors now. Well, that's great. If you have a crystal ball and you know what sectors are going to be good in the future, or you want to take a flyer. But for most of us, we're just not that smart. And so the idea is to keep an all-weather type of portfolio. Don't think you're going to time the market. And history has rewarded those of us who have kept a consistent, diversified asset allocation of U.S. and global stocks and bonds funds that are diversified, maybe across market cap, certain portion of bonds and cash. And over time, I don't believe the 60-40 portfolio is dead.
Okay. Well,
Kirk, can I jump in here? Because Barb sort of talked about the 50 plus group, which I hate to tell you now, Barb, people ages, 50 to 55 are Gen Xers. They're not boomers. And so I'm a Gen Xer, and, Gen X is 1965 to 1980. And then we've got the early millennials, or the Xennials, as they're sometimes called. And I think this group really needs to take this market as an opportunity. And the reason I say that is, Gen X out of the gate was slow on planning. They study each generational cohort. Gen X lagged right out of the gate. And they really didn't start focusing on planning until their 30s. So an interesting statistic that came out in the past year is that 86% of all Gen Xers have less than $200,000 saved for retirement, which is an unbelievable number, right? But the things that you should be doing now is thinking through what you have to build in order to get to retirement. So one of the first things that's getting a lot of press this month, because the COLA is coming out, is Social Security, right? And I think for Gen Xers, I always hear Gen Xers say, oh, it's not going to be around when I'm older. And, we pay into Social Security. They can just raise the cap. There's ways to solve the Social Security problem. But the way Social Security is structured is arguably, it's supposed to replace 40% of your income. Whether that's true for most Gen Xers or not, you're going to have to sit down and pencil that out. So the first thing I would tell people who are Gen Xers is get on socialsecurity.gov, SSA.gov, and access your account and start reviewing your earning records and what your payments will be when you are Social Security eligible. And what's unique about Gen X is we are the first generation where we almost have parity with men and women both working. Dual income households are very common for Gen X. So it will not be a surprise for many of us to find out that both spouses can get their full benefits. And so I do have clients that are claiming today, both had worked, both are claiming getting $40,000 to $45,000 a year from Social Security. So it can be a really meaningful amount. The second thing I really challenge Gen Xers to be thinking about is saving more in retirement plans. So as we've been going through the pandemic and as we've been going through this volatility and studying the generational cohorts out of Zers, millennials, Xers, and boomers, the generational cohort that is doing the most cutting of just discretionary spending is actually Gen X, which is a good thing for our generation. So this is where we need to make sure we're funding our 401ks. If you are, over age 50, and our generation is, do we do the catch up? Do you start to take advantage of things like that? But really focusing on saving and trying to max out our retirement plans. And then the last thing I would say with this is, make sure you're investing, but that you have a plan. One of the most valuable tools that a financial planner can do for you is run a long-term cash flow. They're often called Monte Carlo analysis. And Monte Carlo is the most amazing tool. And I find out that across the board, it's often run really poorly. So what you should do is sit down with a planner at this point, if you're in your 40s, right? And start to map out how much you need to be saving. What do you think you're going to be spending as you're working and in retirement? And then really focus on playing with things like inflation and spending rates. Most people underestimate what they spend, and I do not subscribe to the theory that people will spend less in retirement. So this is a key moment for the Gen X cohort, and I would take total advantage of it right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective, Megan, and I think the retirement spending is definitely a big topic we should get back to at some future date about what people spend compared to what they think they're going to spend. Barb, any response from you? I mean, we're talking about basically different generations and how they should look at planning right now. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's talk about the boomers, those who are nearing retirement or those who are in retirement, because it's most scary to that group because you don't have the promise of your nice big paycheck coming in to make up for the downdraft. And so what should you do? Don't jump out of the market. That's what you should not do right now. And if you really are looking like you don't have the cash that you need to meet your living expenses and you feel you have to draw from your portfolio, well, there are other things that you can do. And I know this is, I say this with a little bit of hesitancy, but you can cut back a little. You can cut back a little on your expenses, and you can look for ways to save and increase your savings rate now. you can also be patient and say, okay, I have enough. It's scary to see that my portfolio has dropped. But even if I'm 70 or even if I'm 80, if my life experience, my life expectancy is 10, 20, 30 years, the likelihood is very strong your investments will come back. So don't act irrationally now. Take time to, like Megan said, like is really good advice, don't look at your portfolio every day. Live as much as you can on your Social Security. Look for ways to eke out a little bit of extra income. I can't tell you, I'm a big consumer of Uber. I like to take Uber. I don't like to drive. And I cannot tell you how many retirees I come across that are Uber drivers. Yeah, you're not going to make a ton of money, but you might make enough money to pay for those dinners out, luxuries that you would have to cut back on before. So really be more flexible now. Think about what you can do before you panic and sell all your securities at the lower level that they're at now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Barb. And I think I think a lot of people have a challenge right now is to, just like you said, stick it out or bail. And, the challenge is because we don't know the future. And this is what I think a lot of people are thinking about is it going to get worse? What am I going to do if I lose more money? So, I mean, this is why investing is so hard, because we have these psychological battles in our own mind, that many of which is your natural wiring as a human being. We're wired to, protect ourselves from getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And yet when it comes to investing, some of that wiring can really, screw with our ability to make rational decisions. So, I think it's just knowing that will help you better prepare. But, we've talked about this in the last few years. Like, you need to mentally prepare early before you get in a crisis, because once you get in a crisis, your brain stops working and you start reacting or not reacting in some cases, which is the wrong thing to do. But if you're mentally prepared for different potential outcomes, then you're better able to navigate them in the moment because you already have a game plan in place. So, while it feels like we're in a crisis because the markets are down 20 or 30%, imagine if they were down 50 or 60%, right? You want to prepare for how you're going to react in different market conditions. I'm not saying it's going down 50 or 60, but you need to think about that. Like, that needs to be a scenario that you consider, because while nobody knows the future, you can certainly prepare for different potential outcomes. So, I think if you're going to manage your own money, that is the way you should think about it. That's how I think about it. It's how Megan thinks about it. It's an important framework to have as a wealth manager and as an investor yourself. So as we get close to wrapping it up here, Megan, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarize what I said today, find really interesting commentators who are calm to follow, because it's much better to listen to that during these markets than to turn on, the TV and get sort of freaked out by what's going on, and stay the course. It's very hard in these markets to not react, but I'll tell you, sometimes doing nothing is the best action. So I'm Megan Gorman. You can find me at Forbes.com/Megan Gorman. Kirk, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, Megan. And before I get to Barb, one quick follow-up on your point is right now we have an enormous amount of information thrown at people through social media, through the news, through everything. And I think one of the best things you can do sometimes is just turn it all off. Turn off social media. Don't look at it for a week. Don't look at the news for a week. I find that a lot of the anxiety that people have is just by watching the news, and their job is to get you fearful. So you watch the news, but if you turn it off, you'll find that a week later, you really didn't miss anything, unless we have a huge crash, but that's, the probability that's very low. So, I think most people, you just don't need to watch this stuff every day. So I would just kind of point that out, because I think that does more harm than good when watching all the news. I mean, you're obviously listening to the show, so that we're all kind of cool, calm, and collected and even-headed, and we're not selling fear. We're not selling, that you're going to make $1 million, and we're not selling that it's going to zero. we're all three of us are rational heads, and I think that's the kind of thinking you need. Even if you listen to other shows, I won't be offended. I know some other people listen to other shows. They do exist. I'm going to admit that. But realistically, just understand that this is going on in your head, and it's going to mess with your ability to think rationally. So, Barb, final thoughts from you. Where can people find more about you?
Megan talked about chatting with your financial planner, and I definitely agree with that. Doing a reevaluation of where you're at now. And if you don't have a financial planner, there's some awesome tools online that can help you take a look at where you are financially. Look at your income, your expenses, your spending, and give you some retirement projections so you're aware and you're not avoiding dealing with this. I like Personal Capital. Wealthfront has a really cool tool available to anyone. It's called Dash. I have a really good article on investment portfolio management that maybe Kirk will put a link to, so you can do some projections, see how things are looking for you, and then use that as a guide going forward to make changes in your behavior and to adjust your asset allocation if it doesn't seem like it makes sense for where you are emotionally, psychologically, and financially. I'm Barbara Friedberg. You can find me on YouTube at Barbara Friedberg. You can find me at Robo Advisor Pros, as well as at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance. See you next time. Bye.
Great. Thanks for coming on, Barb. And just one final point I want to make. If you go to the website, we have a promotion going on for our free money promotion, which also gives you access to the Insiders Club. If you go to the website, you'll get details on that. There's actually a lot of great stuff coming up for those of you who are interested in staying in touch and, being prepared for, the economic conditions that are coming in the next few years. So I'd highly suggest signing up for that, and you'll get access to all of that information. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.